This story I call The Only Thing We Couldn't Tear Up. Kenny and I earned a reputation growing up around Smithwick. Most of the older men considered us to be a little too adventurous, or depending on who you ask, maybe just flat out rambunctious. One of these men was Brown Parker, one of Daddy's closest friends. Brown never missed an opportunity to remind us that if Cecil Lewis had have knocked us in the head when we were just pups, he could have been a millionaire. Coming from Brown, that wasn't criticism, it was just an observation based on years of watching us. Well, Daddy owned an old pry bar, unlike anything you'd ever seen. It had once been a truck axle, about 6 feet long and 1.5 inches in diameter. Brown always claimed it was the only thing that Cecil owned that Kenny and Ronnie couldn't possibly tear up. Well, maybe Brown underestimated us. Daddy had an old D7 Caterpillar bulldozer. We called it Old Kate. She was pretty ancient when he bought it, and we spent just about as much time working on it as we did ever pushing brush. One hot afternoon, we were out beside the shop putting the track back on Old Kate. Kenny was down on the ground wrestling with a massive pry bar, trying to get that track back in place to put it back on, and I was up in the operator's seat. My only job was simple, just to ease the clutch enough to bump the track forward a little at a time. Now, anyone that knew me as a kid knows I was always a little bit distracted at times. Instead of easing the clutch, I just dumped it. That old bulldozer lunged and the track took off, spinning, and that 6-foot pry bar exploded out of Kenny's hands like it had been fired out of a cannon. It bent it into almost a 90-degree angle, sailing about 50 feet in the air and landing out in the middle of the parking lot. Kenny and I just stood there staring at it. Finally, he went over and picked it up and brought it back over there where we were. Then, as if somebody had written a script, over the hill came Brown Parker in his pickup. He drove right up there beside us, that bent pry bar, laying there on the ground. He looked down for a long moment and finally said, "Well, I'll be damned." He never looked at either one of us, never asked what happened, never said a word. He simply shifted her into reverse and backed up and drove off. I don't know if he figured there wasn't anything left to say, or if he had just had every opinion he had ever held about me and Kenny completely confirmed. We spent a long time trying to straighten that old pry bar, but it never did get right again. And from that day forward, Brown Parker no longer claimed it was the only thing we couldn't tear up. This next little segment is kind of what it takes to put one of these videos together using AI to help draw out the pictures and help me arrange things. All I can say is it isn't always easy. This particular one took about 1.5 hours for me to convince AI what I wanted. After a little arguing back and forth, well, we'd finally get it right each time. Sometimes it got kind of colorful, but anyway, scrolling there is just going to show you the highlights of kind of what all it takes to make it happen.